6 weeks from now, the Democratic National Committee will make a crucial choice about its future when the members of that committee elect a new chair that will help guide the party through the 2026 midterms and the next presidential election. So far, 4 candidates have thrown their hats in the ring: Martin O'Malley, Ken Martin, Ben Wickler, and James Skoufis. O'Malley was the first candidate to enter the race. The former Maryland governor and one-time presidential candidate has served as the commissioner of the Social Security Administration for the past year. And Martin O'Malley joins us now.
Welcome, Governor. Good to see you. Got the Maryland corner going on this holiday weekend. Appreciate you, brother.
Merry Christmas, Lieutenant Governor Steele. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So you want to be chairman. I love it. I love it. In light of all of the great crazy noise in the last few days in response to the role of Donald Trump and Elon Musk in this government shutdown, you tweeted, quote, "To the Democrats on Capitol Hill standing strong against Donald Trump and President Musk, now know that we stand with you in defending our republic. Let's reject their extremism together." If you are elected chairman, how do you see your role as one of the leaders of the loyal opposition, in addition to the minority leader in the Senate and certainly the minority leader in the House? How do you see moving the Democratic Party to stand in opposition and to begin to dissect for the country exactly what this administration is doing and how Democrats can be a better choice in the upcoming midterm elections?
Sure. I see my role as being not only someone as the leader of the party that brings us back to our core message, which is the economic security of every man, woman, and child in the nation, but also as a person that convenes, if you will, the larger team of Democratic leaders who are offering themselves in service as candidates or who are now serving, and certainly in the House and in the Senate. In other words, Michael, we have an enormous strength in our party in the men and women that are governors. There will be 39 governors' races up next year. We have an enormous strength in the numbers of people that are county executives and mayors. But in the past, we've tended to regard the DNC as a Washington sort of based organization that's entirely focused on just the White House and Congress. They're very important. I think Hakeem Jeffries showed himself to have a very disciplined caucus. He certainly is on that economic message and pushing back against the Billionaire Boys Club. And my job would be to support all of those entities as they look forward to the elections coming up in the next 2 years. But the key in all of this is come back to what people are concerned about the most, and that is their own families' struggles to make it with inflation and the high cost of living.
And you'd be trying to create that sense of focus at a time when there is more chaos than ever coming from the other side.
A lot of chaos. Man, chaos is the word of the week, isn't it?
I think it may be the word of the next 4 years in response to the role that Trump and Musk.
Or at least 2 of them.
This near government shutdown, you tweeted this: "The Democrats on Capitol Hill standing strong against Donald Trump and President Musk know that we stand with you in defending our republic. Let's reject their extremism together." You know, they try to paint themselves as populists, but they're plutocrats.
Yeah.
And so in as much as it's going to be about a democratic message, it's also going to be about defining them. How do you do that?
Yeah, this is how you do it. I think this is how we do it. There are two. When we were in the White House, our job was to connect the dots back to hardworking people so that they understood the things that President Biden was doing was actually bringing down inflation, giving their kids better opportunities, making the economy better. For a number of reasons, we failed to do that as a party. So now, in opposition, we have to make sure we pick our fights always on 2 things. One is the economy. When they make decisions, when President Musk and Donald Trump make decisions that hurt our economy, the tariffs that drive up the price of everything, including food, and wipe out farm communities, we have to connect those dots right back to every family's kitchen table. Second, there will be things that they do that undermine the very foundations of what it means to have a republic. abuse of the rule of law, looking the other way at conflicts of interest, self-dealing, wrecking institutions so that they can make money as vulture capitalists, picking over the bones of the Republic of the United States. So those are the two areas, the principles of the Republic and the damage that they're about to do to hardworking people all across the country.
You know, Governor O'Malley, I've been talking to a lot of DNC members because
Me too.
You hear, I have heard you have. You and the members say, well, there are people that have not, Mr. Chairman. There are people that have not been talking to the members, but Governor O'Malley has been picking up that phone and calling through the caucuses and the caucus chairs.
Right.
And people say that they're, I've heard from a number of Democratic DNC members that they're also impressed with your team, that some members are saying that they are looking for diversity within the team. They're looking for a chair that has gravitas and a chair that would understand the role of the chair, i.e. the chair they got to raise money, like this is what you'll be doing, raising money, but also building out and supporting a strategy. And you've talked about Howard Dean's 50-state strategy. I think the chairman, I think Jamie would note that he infused a lot of money into Democratic parties across the country and employed and picked up that strategy as well. What is your pitch specifically to members on that and on the vendors? Because the other thing I'm hearing is that they are concerned. Members want to know what is this new what a new party chair would look like in terms of vendors and who is doing business with the Democratic Party apparatus and who is getting paid.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. There is widespread belief among members of Congress, Black Caucus, governors across America, and I've talked to a whole lot of governors. There's widespread belief that we have been poorly served by the traditional small clique of consultants that we rely on as a Democratic Party. If there's two things that most everybody agrees on, it's that and the fact that no one in the campaign seemed to listen. So I have put forward a platform that calls for greater diversity among those that we use all across the country in terms of consultants, in terms of vendors. Lieutenant Governor Steele can tell you what my record was as a mayor and as a governor fighting for greater minority business participation in our own, in our state or in our city. But what I've been saying to members of the DNC is that I am alone among the candidates running for the chair that has actually chaired a national committee, raised substantial amounts of money nationally. I was chair of the DGA for 3 years, not a normal one-year rotation. We expanded our map to places like Montana, Kentucky, which we still hold, Missouri, and other places. And we did it on an economic message that we could fight under in every single state. It was jobs, opportunity, now. Secondly, I am certainly the best operational turnaround leader in this field. And I proved it once again when President Biden asked me to go to Social Security and keep that storied agency from collapsing into a customer service meltdown. Congress has reduced the staffing at Social Security to a 50-year low, Simone. That's while baby boomers raised the numbers of their customers to an all-time high. So it's both the fact that I've served on a national committee, I've led a national committee, raised the money. We all are believing in a 57 state and territory strategy. We know that the core of our party, its connectivity to communities all across the United States, depends on making all of our parties stronger, not just those in 7 states in the swing areas, all 50 states and the territories. But to do that, we are going to have to do an honest, dispassionate, deep dive on where we fell short and why, so that we can restore credibility and raise the amount of money, which will not be easy without the White House, raise the amount of money we need so Hakeem Jeffries, with his very disciplined caucus that he has now, can take back the House and we can win those 39 governor seats that are going to be up all across America.
Just real quick before we let you go, Governor, 2 things. One, appreciate you saying 57 because that's the number. And if you're running for chairman of the National Party, you better know the number is not 50, it's 57. Including those territories is why how I became chairman of the RNC. And the subtext on that is The vendor question, the consultant class within the Democratic Party, like the Republican Party, that will be the red line. Trust me, when you start slashing and burning and cleaning up, they're going to come. Just letting you know. They did for me 3 weeks into the job was the first time I said, you know, we need to fire his behind. But anyway, the second point is Donald Musk especially vows to fund moderate Democrats in primaries to challenge those in deep blue parts of the country. I find that an interesting strategy. What do you think of that idea that you're going to have these folks who are going to try to weigh in and to shape a Democratic primary in some key areas that, you know, where maybe only a Democrat could win?
Yes, it is one more sign of how big money and the concentration of money has also led to the concentration of power in some in very few hands. So that'll make our challenge even more expensive for us. The goal, I would think, is I understand what he's trying to say is that he wants to weaken those Democrats, make them spend money on a primary so that they'll be weaker in the general. So we have become, and when I say we, I mean we the people, the Republic of the United States, has become a new plaything for this boy, Elon Musk. And so he is going to break a lot of things as he plays with this new toy. He is going to undermine norms. I mean, this man who himself, came here and, from South Africa and demeans, so-called illegal immigrants. He's going to break a lot of things. We're his new plaything. We're his new toy. And we need to be able to stand up to that and also stand up to the corruption of our democratic process, the corruption of our republic and our elections by big money. A guy that has seen his wealth double ever since he helped his little buddy, Donald Trump, get elected. So he's going to have the money. He's going to throw it around. He's going to break a lot of things. And this is going to be a real challenge for us as a people to hang on to our government.
Governor Martin O'Malley running for DNC chair. Sounds to me like you're ready to take that plaything away from that little boy.
Ready to go.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Appreciate you being a part of the Maryland Corner here on the weekend.